Hello, I'm Amy Stevenson, and this is The Human CEO. In each episode, we'll be meeting with CEOs and senior leaders to understand their approach to leadership, the challenges they faced, and how they overcame them. We'll also be asking what they feel it takes to be a great leader.
You have to be constantly learning, listening. I think that if people don't have that sort of streak of humility about them, then a corollary of that is I don't need to learn. And I would really struggle with that as a personality trait in a leader.
Welcome to The Human CEO. I'm your host, Amy Stevenson, and today I'm joined by Mark Lippett. Mark is the CEO of XMOS, a deep tech company at the leading edge of artificial intelligence. Mark joined XMOS in 2008 and held the roles of COO and VP of Engineering before taking the helm as CEO. Mark has extensive experience across the electronics industry, with involvement in both blue chip and startup companies. With over 25 years of experience in tech, Mark joins us today to share his insight as a leader and a human CEO.
Thank you for joining us today, Mark. It's great to have you with us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Amy.
Well, I'm looking forward to speaking with you. And so can you tell us a little bit about the organisation that you lead at XMOS, please?
Sure. So XMOS we're what's called a fabless semiconductor company. So we make computer chips, or at least we design computer chips, and we have them made elsewhere. So primarily we're a knowledge company, if you like, an intellectual property company. But we actually sell manufactured semiconductor products to a broad range of applications, actually. So in the history of the business, we spun the technology out of the University of Bristol back in 2005, 2006. It was essentially designed to deliver a technology that was flexible and programmable in software in a manner that wasn't really possible and indeed hasn't been possible. So that we could sort of unleash the sort of creativity and abilities of embedded software engineers who were being slightly constrained to sort of, doing sort of cookie cutter designs where essentially they were reproducing something that was conceived of by another semiconductor company, but they were really constrained in what they could do with it. And what we wanted to do was to unleash that sort of creativity and sort of create a technology that was very easy to program, very easy to do, to design systems with, but also accessible from a programming perspective. It was easy enough to, it was easy to use, but also cheap enough, low power enough to find its way into many different systems. And as the years have gone by, that's become called the Internet of Things, right? So the original, and I can't claim credit for this, but the original, founders of the business, they weren't using those terms, but they were talking about the Internet of Things, and that's it's frequently used as a description of a market, and it really isn't. It's a description of a large group of different markets that sum together to what I would describe as sort of a mega trend, really, that's starting to drive the semiconductor industry. So, historically, the founders of the company were very visionary. They created a technology that solved a problem that has become more and more prescient, more and more important to us. And now it's labeled, we can call it the Internet of Things, and more recently, the intelligent Internet of Things, as we've tried to move some of the sort of artificial intelligence that we've heard so much about in recent history towards the edge of the network. And that gives us much more ability to scale, as well as significant sort of privacy advantages and security advantages. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the markets that we operate in, we have what I would describe as a platform technology, which is general purpose, but it's very difficult to sell a general purpose technology in the sort of broadest sense. So you tend to target specific markets in your strategy. The markets that we've moved from have been initially based on audio processing, and then we've audio processing in personal computing. Then we've used that sort of audio capability and developed it into voice processing, and that's moved us from personal computing, expanding into some consumer applications. And now we're actually we're adding another capability on image processing with our latest generation of technology, and that's giving us a footprint in smart cities and automotive style applications. So we're sort of progressively, organically moving, expanding our footprint still using the same technology, still using the same platform, but essentially demonstrating our capabilities in different markets and building traction in different markets. So, we're really at the very beginning of the journey. We're growing very fast. We're profitable, but we have an enormous amount of opportunity in front of us. And one thing the company's always been very good at, and I guess that's partly down to its provenance, is it's always had a very strong innovation pipeline, and lots and lots of ideas, things that we can do to increase the footprint of the business and move it into more exciting new areas.
Fantastic, exciting place to be, definitely. And in terms of your challenges at the moment, so you joined the business as VP of Engineering, developed into COO, and now CEO for 6.5-ish years, there or thereabouts.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
What kind of challenges are you up against as a leader of that kind of organisation and that stage of its life cycle within that sector? What are you up against currently?
There's always challenges, and they're not always the same. I mean, just I suppose on a slightly mundane side, recently we've as many people will be aware of, we've struggled to get supply, and that's been a situation that the whole semiconductor industry has been suffering with. But these are all challenges, and in the semiconductor industry, there's a cycle, and we're coming out of a supply constrained cycle and moving into a more, I guess, of a demand constrained cycle as a result of various different things. The semiconductor industry is intrinsically cyclical, but there's also obviously world events conspiring against high levels of discretionary spending, and particularly in things like consumer. So there's always those challenges. Either you're supply limited, you're demand limited. But we are, as I say, we're in a fortunate position that even in the worst crunch, so far as demand is concerned, we've got enormous opportunity in front of us. So I think that I'm not sure I'd describe them necessarily as challenges, but the things that I care about, the team. We're primarily a knowledge-driven business, and making sure that the team is initially obviously very strong, but also remains motivated, and that they understand what we're trying to achieve and they're behind it. Those are the things that we really care about. And historically, of course, as a CEO of a startup company or a company that's scaling, and that perhaps is not profitable, then you're always very sort of focused on the financials to make sure that the company remains in a healthy state and doesn't drift into a situation where we're sort of distressed. So we're through that stage now, which is great. But the sorts of capital that I'm worried about is sort of intellectual, or more on the intellectual side, making sure that we're looking after our existing customers, but also looking forward to growing that customer base. Working out what our next go-to-market strategy is to expand into industrial and automotive, for example. So those are the things that I would say challenges, not in a sort of very negative sense. Those are good opportunities, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And your own journey then, Mark, was it always the case? So looking at your background, so you did an electrical and electronic engineering degree?
I'm an EE, yeah.
And so was it always the case that you wanted to be the CEO? Were you always headed for sort of a leadership role, or did you find your passion and it happened organically?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think I always wanted to be a CEO. To be honest, I've always been somebody that wants to get things done. I am very driven. So if I get an eye on something that I want to get done, then I'll put a lot of energy into getting it done. I guess naturally that probably helped me in that direction. I think when I was, at the beginning of my career, when I was an engineer, I did always gravitate towards project leadership, those kinds of, leading teams. It wasn't necessarily through any great ambition. It was just, I think, something that I was okay at doing. And I cared about it. And consequently, I guess as I sort of developed experience, that role became closer and closer to being CEO. And it was really at the point, I suppose. So before XMOS, I ran a small consulting business, and so I've been in sort of startups and scale ups for 20 years. And they've typically been quite small, and I've typically been the person that was willing to do all the stuff that other people didn't want to do because they were busy doing engineering, and that was fine by me. So that's, I think I sort of gravitated towards it. And then most recently in XMOS, I think I definitely had a vision for the company that I wanted to pursue. And so I guess at that point, I probably, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I would have been specifically interested in being CEO at that point.
Mm-hmm. And you did your MBA with Henley as well, didn't you? About that time, about the same time as joining XMOS.
Yeah, so I did. Yeah, I joined XMOS. I started an MBA, and I think I had a child at the same time. So it's kind of busy. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that. Slight understatement there, but well done for getting through it.
That was my wife, actually. My wife too did take credit for that.
So did that change your perspective on leadership, completing the MBA, or was that part of the journey for you?
It did. I mean, so I think as an EE, as an engineer, you obviously learn a lot about technical topics, and actually my degree was somewhat broader. It did have some managerial and strategic sort of aspects to it, but I think for myself, I just needed to understand that there wasn't a whole load of unknown unknowns about what I was going into. I mean, it was fine to not know things, but if you don't know what you don't know, you're going to end up falling over a lot. So I think that was really. There were two things, actually. First was I just come off the back of a company that hadn't succeeded. It hadn't been that successful. It was sold, but it wasn't the success we all hoped it would be. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to understand why, and I wanted to understand what we could have done along the way, and what tools I might have used along the way to either see that coming or try and make a better outcome for that business. Mm-hmm. So that was one motivation, and the other one was this idea that there's almost certainly things I don't know. And more worrying, there's things I don't know.
Yes,
So let's just spend some time studying. And frankly, I was really ready to go back to education as well. That was the other thing. Actually, I was very thirsty for it. Uh-huh. So it was a combination of those things, and I'm very pleased I did as well. I mean, it worked for me. I don't know if it would work necessarily for everyone. It's very hard work, and it does lean very heavily on your family. Particularly the way I did it, but it's very worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just completed myself. Actually, we started at the start of the pandemic, and I've just got the grades this morning. Actually, but yeah, I concur. I went in the same way. So Human's going to be 10 in January. You don't know what you don't know, and I think it's absolutely, for me, it's not just the knowledge, but the confidence of the things that maybe I did know.
Yeah.
And also picking up the things that I wasn't aware of, and the skills that you learn, and just the insight. So I would recommend it personally, but I don't think it's necessarily paramount for a leadership role.
No, I don't think so either. I think it's I don't judge people for having MBAs or not having MBAs.
No, absolutely.
It worked for me.
Yes.
That's enough.
I'm coming from the same place. And in terms of the characteristics then, so speaking about great leaders and successful leaders, you've spoken about sort of having a vision, you've spoken about, you've expressed humility in terms of, I don't know what I don't know. What other characteristics do you think are important for a successful leader? Is it case by case, company by company, or? I think
to be, I mean, it's not a great answer, but it probably is. But I think there are certain fundamental characteristics. I mean, a leader is obviously somebody that relies on other people to get things done by definition. Mm-hmm. And I think trust and integrity are absolute cornerstones. I think if you haven't got trust and integrity, it's very difficult to get people to follow you, because you really want people to follow you through thick and thin. And I also, I somewhat hesitate to say follow as well, because I would position myself in the front and behind everyone else. Because the front, when I'm telling them the vision and I'm saying this is what I think is going to happen, and this is what I've learned, and I think this is our place in the world going forward, and then I move to the back, and at that point, I'm sort of facilitating and making sure people are happy and motivated and looking after the team. So I don't necessarily think it's always, well, I suppose leadership of a sort, but I struggle with this idea that you're always out in the front, because actually I think I am a great believer in hiring the right people and getting out of their way, but there is this, you can't just do that. You need to give people direction. But once you've done that, then there is some merit in that idea that you get out of people's way. So I think there's trust and integrity. Those are the sort of the cornerstones. If you haven't got that, it doesn't matter what you do. On top of that, you need to be able to tell us. You need to be able to. Well, tell a story is underplaying it. You need to be able to identify a vision that works, right? So that works. I mean, in our company, there's a bunch of very, very smart people, and the vision has to make sense. Otherwise, they'll totally call me out on it, which is exactly what I would hope for. So the vision needs to make sense, and then you need to be able to tell that story. You need to be able to tell that story internally. You need to be able to tell it externally. So storytelling's important as well. But running this sort of the thread that runs through the whole thing is integrity. So if you're telling a story that is simply just a story, you don't believe it, and then no one else will. They'll sense that. So I think that's those are some of the things. I also think, you mentioned humility. I think that's incredibly important. Because I also think that there's some great quotes on there. I'm not sure which mug I've got here, but we've got a bunch of mugs that we printed our company values on, and one of them is humility, and we want to be proud of what we've done, but we also want to be humble. And I think the world is such a complicated place and so dynamic that if anyone claims to really understand it at any given point in time, I think that's a questionable position to take. You have to be constantly learning, listening, interpreting. I think that if people don't have that sort of streak of humility about them, then a corollary of that is I don't need to learn. And I would really struggle with that as a personality trait in a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the humility piece links into what you were saying about either being in front or behind, because I think sometimes you need to be agile as a leader. And I think if you haven't got the humility to go, right, I need to get behind these guys, all right, they need somebody at the front, or even through the pandemic and often through tough times, you're shoulder to shoulder with your team, or you can be. I think if you haven't got the humility to say, actually, my place is over here, rather than needing to be at the front all the time, I think that can be. I frequently get told off for doing things I shouldn't be doing, and that's not I'm stepping all over people's toes. That's CEO shouldn't be writing shouldn't be doing the pitch or writing the HR policy for this kind of award or something. They're not good examples, but if it's a gap, then why shouldn't I do it? Otherwise, I'm diverting an engineer perhaps from what they're doing. Everyone's doing stuff. Everyone's delivering value. Yes.
I'm not going to sort of be superior about it. Just get on and do it.
No, you don't strike me as the kind of person that has an ivory tower.
No, I don't.
No, good. And in terms of your leadership style, then, was there a piece of advice that you were offered, or an experience that you had earlier on in your career that shaped your leadership style or your approach to leadership?
I've had a few instances of things that have lodged in my head. I was on and out one of the earliest ones, and this is really going back. This is going back to when I was sort of 22, 23. I was on a leadership outward bound course as a part of I was sponsored through university, and I went and joined the company that sponsored me, and they said that as a matter of course, they sent all their sponsored students out onto this leadership outward bound course. And I remember being hauled over the coals for being autocratic. It was a nighttime exercise. We had to find somebody that was notionally injured in a forest, and we didn't have anything to do it with. We had to organise ourselves into search parties and things like that. And I was tired, and I think it was 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was the leader, and I started barking at people to do stuff. Everyone was tired, and I got rightfully berated for that. And so I guess I've always been a little bit conscious of that, the possibility that under certain stresses I'll revert to that. And it's one of those things, the things you're aware of are the things that probably you don't manifest because you monitor yourself for them. So that was one thing. But along the way, there's been lots of things that I've done. I mean, actually on that particular course, I was at the same time as being berated for that, I was singled out as being one of the people that showed, leadership capabilities and potential. So that was that. I guess that might have sown a seed of an idea in my head. Mm-hmm. But really, it's the people you work with and the people you work for that help you form the kind of leader that you want to be. Because there's no it's no one kind. And I've worked with some really amazing people. I'd sort of cite Charles Cotton. I have a coach, John Hamm, who's amazing. There's a lot of and I've been lucky enough to work with some of the best VCs in the world, and I've also seen some leadership traits that I don't particularly admire. So it's one of those things you keep your eyes open, you figure out who you want to be, and you go after that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you can learn more from those people that do it the way you wouldn't do it yourself. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes you have very strong, but I have very strong views about how people should be treated and how you should behave, even if you see something you regard as negative behaviour, how you might reflect that. Mm-hmm. And some people just break those rules, right? Some people you sort of see some people's behaviour and you think, my God, that's and you're they're a leader of a company, for example, and they're breaking all those rules, and you sort of question how that's possible. But they're just a different size and shape, and they're making up for it perhaps in different ways. So there's no one answer, right? It's just the answer that you're comfortable in your own skin, really. Yeah. And in terms of advice for someone that was looking to follow in your footsteps, so either someone that was right at the start of their career with their sights set on a leadership role, or they're just taking a step up, what kind of advice would you offer to someone in that situation? Are there any sort of if I knew then what I know now moments?
I would. So the one thing I would say, actually, and I think this is one thing that we tend to undervalue, is time. And I would say, basically, I mean, it's the one currency you can't pay back. Mm-hmm. So you tend to worry. We tend to worry a lot about money and and how we're spending money and whether or not we're spending it wisely. And I'm talking about primarily in a business context. Mm-hmm. Whilst we're perhaps not really attributing much value to our time, and that's something I would say to the younger me is don't spend time. Mm-hmm. Doing things that aren't valuable, because that you will not get back. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's one piece of advice. I mean, the other one is that I'm sort of frequently quoted for is every day's a school day. It's this idea that you cannot afford to stop learning, and it doesn't matter. I mean, you're sat in front of a rack of books. I would be sat, if I was at my home office, I'd be the same. But it doesn't matter what medium it is, right? You don't have to be a bookworm. You can watch YouTube. You can, read websites. Well, it doesn't talk to people. It doesn't. It just doesn't matter. But just be open-minded and always learning. I think that's one thing. And actually, that comes back to that sort of that humility, because the fact that if you understand that you need to learn, that means you also understand you don't know everything.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Constantly curious, I think, is the way forward. Mm-hmm. And so you've mentioned the leaders in your past that have shaped you, or pieces of advice that you've had from them. But is there a leader, past or present, famous or otherwise, that particularly stands out for you? Yeah, and if so, what is it about them?
So I mean, it's probably a little bit of a cliched answer, particularly for a Brit, but it would be Churchill. Okay. And I think. Many times in my career, and more, I guess, in the sort of second half of my career, there have been really, really tough times, and you're trying to carry a team through it, and you're sort of struggling for the way to articulate how you want them to come together, and trying to sort of build that vision of the future and so on. And I think there's two things about Churchill that really, really appeal to me. One is resilience. It took him forever to become prime minister, and he went through a lot of things on the road to that point. Mm-hmm. But really, the period during which he was leading the country was I mean, it was a very dark time, right? And he absolutely rallied a whole bunch of people into a mission that was not the least bit pleasant or attractive. It was probably there were many people that didn't want to get involved, and yet he was absolutely unshakable, immutable. And I think that's incredibly admirable. By the way, and also whilst sort of wrestling his own demons, he wasn't. He had his own challenges, his own mental health issues, and he was dealing with those as well. So I think it's it's cometh the time, cometh the man. But in that context, a truly remarkable leader. So that would be my one answer.
Yeah, good answer. Good answer. Great answer. And in terms of, so we've spoken about books and reading and continuous learning. What I'm always really interested in is what leaders are reading or consuming. So be it a podcast or an audiobook. What kind of recommendations do you have? What's shaped your style, or what have you enjoyed or found valuable in the past?
So I must have about 50 or 60 business books at home that I've read, and I have read them over the years. There's a few. So I'm a highlighter. I was talking to my wife about this last night. I go through books, and some people will hate this. I highlight bits in books that really resonate, and so the books that I've highlighted the most are probably the ones that I got the most out of.
Okay.
So there's a few things. So as a CEO, when you're going through sort of, you go through good times and bad times, sometimes you sort of, you rely on some books to comfort yourself that you weren't the only one. And there's a couple of those. One's called, one that I'm quite keen on is called The Messy Middle. Okay. Which I think is it's a great book about the fact that, when you look back on the success of a company, you tend to okay, so this is where we started, so that's one dot on the graph, and this is where we finished, that's another dot on the graph. We'll just draw a straight line between those two, and that plots the course of the business. And actually, it's like a massive mess of stuff going on in the middle. Yeah. So that's a good one. The Hard Thing About Hard Things is a good book for anyone that's sort of in the venture space as well. And then so I'm quite I guess one of the things I was doing, I was really interested in my MBA was culture. Wow. And there's a book by Edgar Schein and called Organizational Culture and Leadership, and that was my go-to. In fact, to be honest, that's probably the only book on culture that I refer back to now, apart from oh crikey, I've forgotten the name of it. There's a book on cultural diagnosis, which is we sometimes go back to as a company, because we just want to see where the culture is, and maybe whether or not we want to shape it. It's important. It's important to take that temperature check. It's important to take a deliberate approach to it. Yeah, absolutely. And then there's somewhat more mundane things about how you think about strategy. Blue ocean strategy is a classic, and people. Yes. It's become one of the ones that's people just talk about. People talk about blue oceans and red oceans like it's it's in the Oxford English Dictionary, and I don't know, maybe it is, but that's where it came from. And balanced scorecards. That's something we use here. Okay. Kaplan and Norton, and there's another one called the Checklist Manifesto, which I think is another great book. But that's more, and that's really, that's about the power of checklists, and I'm absolutely, I should also, I'm an absolute list maker. Okay. So, and it's just because I'm quite disorganized in some cases. So that's been my my antidote to that is to write lots of lists. Yeah. In terms of sort of switching off, do you read to switch off? What do you absorb from that perspective? I do sometimes. I actually try and if I really want to switch off, I play the guitar. I'll make things. I'm quite keen on working with my hands, so woodwork and things like that. Which I think, by the way, I don't know if it's true. I've got limited experience of other businesses, but in engineering businesses, people that do woodwork are quite common. Okay. And it's I think it's just because it's very engaging, and it engages a part of your brain you don't perhaps normally use. So that's something that I do. I've got I have quite a big family. I spend time with family. I really enjoy cooking. But it's always stuff that's that uses both your head and your hands. Tactile. But it's sort of specifically needs to be needs to take your mind off of work. So it's almost deliberately chosen to be intellectually quite, engaging as well as using your hands.
It's important to find those things that help you just get in that different space, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's as important as sitting down is for your physiology, is to find some other space for your head.
Yeah, absolutely. And so over the next 6, 9, 12 months, what's going to be happening at XMOS that you can share with us?
Well, we're going to continue to grow strongly. I mean, essentially, we're already on we're on the right track. So if you were to project me forward 6, 9 months and I was to say, we just carried on keeping on, then that would be great. So there's the industry, because of the world events, is going to have a bit of turbulence. But we'll be buckling up and we'll get through that. We've got essentially, in terms of our own sort of looking at our own business, we've got lots and lots of opportunities in the pipeline. I'm looking forward to getting out those products getting out into the world. We'll be thinking ahead about expansion into some new markets, industrial, a little bit of automotive. We're doing a lot of partnering because it's just becoming so important because of the complexity of what we do, and partnering is becoming extremely important. So building an ecosystem of partners that you can work with to solve a single problem on ultimately multiple problems is becoming a really important thing as well. So
absolutely,
we'll be partnering a lot more, hopefully a lot more. But essentially just pushing forward on many of the things that we're already doing, looking forward to growing strongly, bringing more people on board.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, I wish you the best of luck with it. And Mark, I really enjoyed speaking with you, so thank you for sharing your time and telling your story.
I appreciate it. It's been fun. Thanks Amy.